Wrap it up, I tell you. In the tradition of Sam and Dave's beautiful song Wrap It Up, I am starting my Wrap Up the Year on my BookTube channel. My name is Rainer and welcome to Rainierbooks. Today it's time for the long-awaited top 10 reads of myself, Rainer, Rainier from Rainierbooks of this year in the category of novels. My top 10 novels that I read in 2020. And without further ado, let's get started. Number 10 on my list of the best novels that I've read in 2020 is a novel that was published this year in the summer. I think it was published by Scribner. It was published by Scribner, and it maybe has the most beautiful cover of 2020. This is Graham Swift's novel, Here We Are. Here We Are by Graham Swift is my number 10. A novel about a triangle love story, actually, starting in the wonderful city of Brighton in England and Sussex in the 1950s and 1959. We have Ronnie, Evie, and what's the other guy's name? Jack Robinson. And choices you made in your early life, the love of your life, and reminiscent like 40 years after. There's a beautiful melancholy hanging over this very little book, and it's really lighted up my summer a little bit when COVID hit us here in everywhere in Europe. Here we are, and once again, look at this amazing cover. A magical book about a magician on the Brighton Pier and what happened to him. Number 9 of my books of the year 2020 of my novels of the year 2020 is Nightboat to Tangier by Kevin Barry. I read this very early in January 2020 when the world still was a world, okay world for us, and where we thought that we could do everything, where we thought that we could go to Algeciras in Spain and wait for a night boat to Tangier, which we didn't do anymore now at the end of 2020. And actually two Irish gangsters are sitting in the port of Algeciras in Spain, and they're waiting for the night boat to Tangier to Morocco. And they're also waiting for one of the guy's daughter. And they talk a lot about their past. They have an incredible banter in between with lots of sarcastic and cynical jokes that I really like. There's some incredible dialogue in this book that was also remarked by a lot of reviewers. And Nightboat to Tangier is also a short book, like Here We Are, a great condensed novel. It reminded me of Harold Pinter's dramas, if you've seen or read one of them. Number 8 is a book that I also have to show you the cover here. This is because I own it as an ebook. This is 5 Little Indians by Michelle Good. This is from Canada. 5 teenagers who are released in the age of 15, 16 from the so-called residential school system in Canada. The residential school system was there to erase the Indian out of the Canadian. That was the goal, and that's why the Canadian government about 100 years until late in the 1900s I think 1970s, have taken away small children from their First Nation parents, brought them to residential schools where a lot of abuse happened, where horrible conditions were governing those kids, where kids died, and then when they were like 16, 17 years old, they were just thrown out on the streets to live their lives. And in this case, 5 Little Indians, Michelle Good, who is herself a First Nation person from Canada, who is also an advocate for the survivors of residential schools, has written this story as a novel that is full of compassion and full of horror. That is happening a little bit, that is happening inside the residential schools, but mostly afterwards when those kids were thrown out on the streets and they had to build their lives from scratch and they were left alone with all the post-traumatic stress that they had gathered. Number 7 Number 7 of my favorite novels of 2020 is, I think it's also published in 2019, and I have a copy signed by the author. This is Tash Aw's We the Survivors, and this takes us to Asia, this takes us to Malaysia, and to The Confession of a Killer. And We the Survivors, there is the narrator is telling his story about his life story, and also why he killed a man, to a young sociologist, a young woman who visits him in prison. It's another great throw by Tash Aw. I really like this writer. He has also convinced me totally with his book 5-Star Billionaire a couple of years ago, and I want to read more of Tash Aw. And I have one more book on my TBR for 2021 that I tell you about in another video. This is Tash Aw, We the Survivors. I learned so much about Malaysia, about rural life in Malaysia, but also about the vast difference between the capital Kuala Lumpur, or KL as it is called in Asia, and the rural life. This is also a novel about poverty and racism. Number 6 is a book that I got from the library. It's also one of these short novels. I might like short novels. This is the fourth, I guess, really short novel on my list. This is Sisters by Daisy Johnson. I read this quite late, I think in October, or September or October this year. Daisy Johnson's second novel. She's a very young author. She is the second youngest author ever to be nominated for the Booker Prize in the United Kingdom. Sisters is her second work, her second novel, and this is about sisters who live June and September, who live together with their mother in a house moved together with their mother to a house at the English coast, and we learn the story from both sisters' perspectives. But we very soon learn that something is really disturbing, and that the relationship between the sisters is very full of tension. And even the mother has a disturbed past, and Daisy Johnson slowly unravels what's really the cause of all these tensions in the novel. And this is really a promise for more great work to come from Daisy Johnson. Number 5 is a novel that I listened to in the summer, and I cannot rave enough about this book, and I put it on my number 5, on my top 5. This is by Kyoung Frazier, Pizza Girl. Pizza Girl sounds like a comic book. Pizza Girl sounds like, well, a Pizza Girl. And Pizza Girl is about a 18 or 19-year-old woman in Los Angeles, California. And she's pregnant. She lives together with her boyfriend and with her mother. And she doesn't know where life will take her. She has a lot of questions about it. She is also asking herself if her boyfriend is the right man to spend the rest of her life with, what will change when she gets the baby, and so on in such a young age. And Pizza Girl is delivering pizza. That's her job. And one night she delivers a pizza to a woman who is almost twice her age, could be her mother by the age. She's a family woman, and a very interesting relationship between these two women start. And I don't want to talk anything about how this book ends, but I think it's a very authentic book, full of incredibly beautiful dialogue, full of questions that such a young person has to ask about her life, and a very surprising end to me. Pizza Girl, one of the great novels of this year, 2020, that I really wish would find more readers. Number 4 is a classic. It's from 2017. It's a backlist book. I got it from the library because when the Women's Prize was running this year, you know, the actual announcement of the Women's Prize winner came a bit late this year. But when the Women's Prize was running, I was looking at titles who had won the Women's Prize earlier, and I decided to get some from the library. And one of them I got, and which I actually ranked, was Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie, which is my number 4 of the best books that I've read in 2020. And Home Fire is an adaptation of a classical Greek play into our time. And this is situated mostly in London. It starts in the United States, it goes to London, but also into Pakistan. We have 3 siblings in this story, an older sister and twins, a boy and a girl, age 19. And they have a troubled family history because their father was a terrorist, or was suspected a terrorist, and he was flown He was he was flown to Guantanamo Bay as a prisoner, and he died on his way to Guantanamo. So the family has some kind of terrorist stamp on it, and it's this atmosphere after 9/11 where everything is and everyone is who comes from Muslim countries, unfortunately, is under suspicion, and the British Homeland Office, British Homeland Security, is very suspicious of each and everyone. And there's a defense minister, there's a minister of the Interior in the UK who is himself a Muslim, who is the first Muslim minister of the Interior, and he is very critical about. He is very a hardliner. Maybe even to show that he is doing everything by the book. So he's a hardliner against fellow Muslims. He is talking a lot about taking away the citizenship of people who have two citizenship, maybe one in Pakistan, maybe one in of the UK. So he tries everything to strip suspects of their British citizenship to be able to expel them to their home country. In this atmosphere, we have this story that is really disturbing, that is beautifully built by Kamila Shamsie. It was one of the great reads of this year, and I really advise you to read Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie, which brings these two families together, the family of the Minister of the Interior and the three siblings who have lost their father. And I'm actually happy that I own all of the three books that are up front here. The bronze medal goes to The Vanishing Half by Bennett. I was, for a long time in this year, when I started reading this book, I knew that it was a competitor for the best book of the year. This is the story of twin sisters, Afro-American twin sisters from the American South, from the state of Louisiana, where from a village where all Afro-American people who live there traditionally have very light skin. And the twin sisters are 15, 16 years old when they leave this little town in Louisiana, and they go to New Orleans. One of the sisters disappears, and the other sister returns to her village after a couple of years. The sister who returns to her village marries a man in New Orleans who is Afro-American, and they get a daughter together, a baby daughter who has very dark skin. The other girl, the other sister, the other twin sister goes to somewhere else. We don't know. We find out later, but she has very light skin as well, and she is. Many people think that she's white, and she plays that herself. So she lives the life of a white woman, and this is a story about racism, about family, about how you cannot neglect your past, or can you neglect your past? Can you start a completely new life and neglect your own cultural identity? This is beautifully told, I think, in the very tradition of Southern narrators, and Brit Bennett is really a shooting star. This is a bestseller. Her second novel, The Vanishing Half, is my number 3 of the year in 2020. Number 2. That was my first buddy read on BookTube, number 2. So some of you might know which book is coming. Actually, the first 3 places, I talked about 2 men, or number 10 and number 9. Number 3, 2, and 1 are written by women. So the second place, the silver medal, goes to Vanessa Veselka and her amazing novel, The Great Offshore Grounds. And this is, when I started with books that were a little bit shorter, about 200 pages or a little less maybe, this is a real one with, I think, 450 pages. And it's Vanessa Veselka's second novel. She has written more than 10 years on this novel. I read this together with Paula from Draw Your Book. And Paula and I had also the great honor and opportunity to talk to Vanessa Veselka on Zoom, when we have the video on both of our channels, where we talk with the author. This is a great exploration of America and of the socially underprivileged people in America, about poverty, about the country in itself, the land, and what the land is doing to people and what people do to the land. It's an exploration of family, of feminism, and just a great American novel. The Great Offshore Grounds by Vanessa Veselka. This book got way too little attention in 2020. So here we come to the winner of my personal book prize of 2020, my favorite novel of this year. I read it pretty early in 2020 and I was blown away by it. It has won so many awards, it has won so many prizes, it's a bestseller, and it deserves to be a bestseller because this is one of the best books, well, I think it's one of the best books that I've ever read in my life until now. Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine, Evaristo. This is from Britain. This is from a queer black British author who has written the story of, I think, 10 to 12 British women and other, because we have one non-binary person in that novel, but 11 women, and they tell the story of their lives in the UK as black people from from the arrival in Great Britain, sometimes when people came from Jamaica, for example, from the Caribbean or from Africa, until and how they were treated, and what happened to them. This is so authentic and so believable in the story, and most of these families are connected to each other. We also have a great story of abuse in a lesbian relationship, which is totally threatening and really took me away. I was so excited when I read that, in a way that I was getting, oh my God, why doesn't she go away? I hope that she can go away. I hope she can leave that relationship. It was so intense and so honest in a way that it seemed so incredibly real. And what comes to Girl, Woman, Other is what in addition is the language of Bernardine Evaristo. This is not written in a normal way. It's written like a poem, like a 400 or 500. How many pages did I read here? It's 450 page poem, and I just picked one random part of it for you here, and read it because it sounds so beautiful, even when I read it. Chapter 2, Carol. Carol walks through Liverpool Street Station with its intergalactic glass and steel ceiling propped up by towering Corinthian columns. She's headed for the escalators and the soaring windows that let in a holy glow of morning light. She passes underneath the timetable board listing departures and arrivals. Articulated through the medium of glowing alphanumerics, text flipping and updating as announcements bellow from the clustered boom boxes, informing passengers about platform numbers and itemizing all stations en routes to final destinations, where the train will end, and the numerous delays due to vandalism on the tracks or leaves on the line, or sun on the line, or a body under a train. How very inconsiderate, not to her, to choose to throw yourself in front of a mechanical iron beast weighing thousands of tons and racing at a top speed of 140 miles per hour? To choose such a brutal and dramatic finale. Carol knows what drives people to such despair, knows what it's like to appear normal but to feel herself swaying just one leap away from the amassed crowds on the platforms who carry enough hope in them in their hearts to stay alive, swaying just one leap away from eternal peace. These days, however, she feels very much alive, very much looking forward, as they say at work, to the next window of opportunity. These days, she's a willing orchestral player in the cacophony of London's busiest station, with a footfall of nearly 150 million pairs of living feet every year. The anonymous convergence of commuters who are 99.9% genetically identical, regardless of their visual packaging, regardless of their psychological wiring, warped, tangled, shorted, electrocuted. All of them so perfectly composed, so poised and in control. Socialized to be out in public as reasonable members of society this Monday morning, where all dramas are interiorized. Look at her in her perfectly tailored city clothes, the balletic slope of her shoulders, straightened hair scraped back into a martial top knot, eyebrows plucked with calligraphic flair, her discreet, no-nonsense jewelry of platinum and pearls. I have no words for this. This is so beautiful. This is my number one book of 2020, Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. And this was, no, there's one joker. There's one joker. There's a book that I haven't finished yet. I'm doing this as a buddy read and listen, because I both read and listen to the book. Buddy read with Karen from Karen Evans. And we have like read 50%, and we have promised each other that we are going to finish this book until tomorrow night on New Year's Eve. We're going to finish it. And I'm sure that this book will be a top 10 contender, that it will just dive in, and it's a candidate for one of the medals maybe, and maybe even for the title. No, I don't think Girl, Woman, Other is in danger. It's so difficult, but this book is definitely top 10. I don't say on which position I would put it, but it's definitely my 11th book for the top 10 because I haven't finished it yet. This is Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. A book that, exactly like Girl, Woman, Other, blows you away by its mastery of language, by its mastery of construction. It's the story about a woman from India. I think it's mainly playing in Pune. I haven't, as I said, I have 50% to go in this book, but I will reach it until tomorrow night. And Avni Doshi has written a masterpiece of a novel. It's a debut novel, which makes this even more unbelievable, because this is like a masterpiece that you expect from someone who has written 4 or 5 novels, like Bernardine Evaristo. She has written a couple of books before Girl, Woman, Other. So Avni Doshi's story is definitely a top 10 contender, and I definitely think that this is one of the best books of 2020. But this was my list of top 10 plus a joker in this year, and I hope that you have heard of one or two of these books. Please drop a comment down below what you think of those books, if you have read them, or if you have suggestions for other books. If you have made your own top 10, please leave a link down below if you are a fellow booktuber and have done your own top 10 list. I saw a couple of your lists, and this is not my last video for 2020. There will be more to come, because I decided to separate the short stories from the novels, because I was so fascinated by some short story collections that I read this year that I want to give them a little bit of space their own. With that said, I thank you very much, and I wish that you have a great second to last day of 2020. See you soon, wear a mask, be safe, and bye-bye.